Greetings, members one and all of the Salivation Nation, an empire of marijuana, gold, and silver, and some important lessons to be learned. Let's explore! Indeed, this is an article that comes to us from the New York Post and about a multi-million-dollar weed empire in college. What's fascinating about this is how important precious metals played in the role of this story. And there's a couple different lessons we can learn from this, but let's take a look at what this is about here. This is the story of Eric Kanori, who built this empire and was eventually arrested, and now has written a book about his ordeal here. Eric Kanori buried $2.3 million worth of gold bars behind his childhood home in Lake George, New York. 3 feet underground, inside of a steel tool chest, below a large rock, the precious metals went into place as a potential inheritance gift to the marijuana kingpin's mother. If I was on my deathbed, Kanori told the Post, I could guide her on where to dig. So that's lesson number 1. This is multi-generational wealth, and the gold is durable, and it was a way that he was actually doing the smart thing and putting it into gold, untrackable, untraceable. But nonetheless, as to why he employed gold bars instead of greenbacks, Kanori said, buried cash gets moldy. Indeed it does. One time I dug up $1 million in 20s and hundreds, and the bills stuck together, so he learned the hard way. He hired people to separate the cash, and we put it all into a room with a dehumidifier. Still, my supplier complained. He thought something was wrong with the money. Indeed it was. Kanori, now 43, and once the largest high-end marijuana wholesaler on the East Coast, explains that those life-changing gold millions represented a fraction of his net worth. At my peak, I was doing $50 or $60 million per year in sales. Can you imagine? Wow. After overhead costs that included drivers, warehouses, partners, and occasional robberies, my margins were around 5 to 10% maximum, for a net of $2.5 to $6 million annually. Cocaine and opioids have a much larger margins, but they also come with the risk of longer prison sentences. Indeed they do. So he was actually pretty smart in assessing risk, and that is another lesson to be learned here, because at the time, marijuana was illegal, but again, it wasn't, and of course even today, it's still a federal crime. But nonetheless, his dealings career was a long and treacherous ride of hairpin turns, duplicitous partners riding shotgun, and duffel bags so heavy with cash they could barely be hoisted. But as Kanori explains in his recently published book, Pressure, a memoir, a peerless development, it all began with candy, of all things. And here's an image of him with the wads of cash that he had, a crucial element of the business. And notice that, this cash, because it was not durable underground to be able to store it, he converted his earnings into gold bars, which he viewed as more secure form of currency, than cold, hard cash. And indeed, that is one of the biggest lessons we can have from this, and also secure being less transfer or less tracked, and obviously durable, much more durable. A lot of wealth in a small space. And here's this other image of him carrying a duffel bag. He began his weed kingpin career almost by accident while studying at university. He sold a small personal weed stash to other students, and then continued to sell and sell and sell as his profits surged. While a high school student, Kanori would buy candy at a gas station near his family's home in Lake George and sell a piecemeal to other kids at school. From there, for the pot-loving teenager, It was a small step to scoring an ounce of marijuana and breaking it down to dime bags. The business kept him high and flush. After graduating high school in 1997, he brought 2 ounces to the State University of New York at Plattsburgh, expecting it to serve as a personal stash. But entrepreneurship got the better of him. He sold it and sought a source for more. Finding one was easy. So there you go. He is entrepreneurial in this regard for sure. He kept his ears open. Kanori said, I kept my ears open. Whenever somebody told me they had a friend with a lot of weed, I asked to meet the friend. People always liked working with me. I stayed quiet and kept my promises. He quickly scooted up the drug world food chain, scooted up in the chain, and still at sunny Pittsburgh, Kanori sold product to big-time dealers nearby. He bought pounds of the stuff from Native Americans on a Mohawk reservation and from a motorcycle gang near the Canadian border. Kanori transported his illicit cargo in the trunk of an unobtrusive 1987 Pontiac Bonneville with textbooks in the passenger seat. By his 2001 graduation, when Kanori received a degree in business management, he had already done more than $1 million in drug deals and was worth some $250,000. And here we can see an image of the silver bars here. Silver and gold became an important part of Kanori's business, as the metal bars would not become contaminated by soil and moisture when he buried them underground to hide them from authorities. And we'll look at other photos, but you can see here, it's in this tool chest here, all that silver in there. These look to be 100-ounce bars. In fact, we can kind of take a look at this here and see in this image that it almost looks like, it's kind of hard to tell there, but these do look like to be 100-ounce bars. Out of college, charging hard in the drug trade, Kanori had 15 different cell phones to keep suppliers from getting linked to one another in the event of a bust, and enjoyed a sexed-up lifestyle. Off the job, it was all high-end escorts and 5-star hotels, he said, adding that his Big Apple bed down of choice was Mandarin Oriental Hotel. I grinded for 100 hours per week, checked into a hotel, and called a $5,000 hooker. She'd come to the suite and tell me how handsome I am. Of course, for that amount of money, you'd probably tell anybody you're very handsome. My accomplishments were not acknowledged in newspapers, but I was acknowledged by Ukrainian prostitutes who could have been models. I craved love and acceptance. And as Kanori's business grew, his life became increasingly complicated. He'd organize shipments of weed via large trucks from growers in British Columbia to the East Coast, while maintaining a legal and legitimate business that had him putting water installations into people's backyards. I wanted something to tell people when they asked what I did for a living. Plus, I liked the idea of being a pawn man by day and outlaw by night, and bankrolling a doomed documentary that had him interviewing women about their innermost thoughts. In 2009, after a decade of flying high in the drug trade, Kanori took his first vacation. He brought a potential girlfriend. Uncharacteristically, she was a non-hooker, with him to the Bonnaroo Music and Art Festival in Tennessee. I wanted to open my heart instead of my wallet. In Kanori's case, this meant watching David Byrne perform rather than packing a 300-foot shipment into a cargo trailer to be driven by one of his regular transporters, a well-known downhill mountain bike racer by the name of Missy Giove. Normally, I paid women to be available on my schedule. This time, I put my heart instead of the business. As it turns out, that was when everything collapsed. Do I regret it? Yes, for sure. And this is some of the $1.5 million seized by the DEA during the initial bust that took Kanori's empire down. Kanori says his arrest and subsequent indictment were the result of an unwisely outsourcing a drug run to a friend. Indeed, and there is some of the pot that was discovered, 400 pounds of it, by authorities from a truck driven by former mountain biking world champion Melissa Grove, as well as from Kanori's home outside of Saratoga Springs, New York. And explicitly, the normally reliable Giove unbeknownst to Canori, outsourced the job to a massage therapist friend. Giove, according to Canori, was paid $60,000 for the job and compensated the massage therapist with only $3,000. When Canori met Giove at his stash house in Saratoga Springs and saw her looking fresh as a daisy after what was supposed to be the days of driving, he suspected something was wrong. A car that seemed to be following him furthered the concern. Then, when he noticed a tracking device in the back of the truck, Canori knew he had a problem. It turned out that the massage therapist was pulled over by police for speeding. The hastily packed truck was quickly shown to be loaded with weed, so he instantly rolled over. Giove was arrested and pleaded guilty to one of 6 of conspiracy to possess drugs with the intent to distribute. She was sentenced to 6 months of time served, 6 months of home detention, and 5 years of supervised release. Giove did not respond to her request for comment. And in no time at all, agents swarmed Canori's stash house with $1.5 million of cash was uncovered, and he was read his Miranda warning after having been handcuffed for hours. Philosophical in retrospect, Canori acknowledges that the unraveling was inevitable. I would not have stopped until I got caught, he admitted. There's always one more run, one more deal, one more group of people to satisfy. I had an innate desire to keep everyone around me happy while being hollow inside. And there you go. That was one of the other lessons to learn. When you get involved in a crime like this, it just tends to snowball. Unexpectedly, prison time provided a revelation. I never knew how important it was to take a break until I was in the concrete cell, laying on a threadbare mattress for the first time in years. I did not hear my phone ringing, but of course, the confiscated phones were blowing up. Had another $3 million worth of shipments coming in that day. A lot of people wondered why I wasn't answering. I was assumed to be dead or in jail. I lost a couple of million in the streets that day. I'm sure the stolen weed was sold. Yes, indeed. Canori laundered some of the unrecoverable drug money and hired a fancy Park Avenue attorney to represent him, but he presented a hurdle by refusing to rat out conspirators. That sounded heroic on paper. In reality, however, not everyone honored that code that Canori adhered to. Agents traveled around the U.S., getting information on me, convincing people to flip, he said. People I didn't tell on, they told on me, and I didn't even know it. That was a hard pill to swallow. The DEA even found out about his buried treasure, stupidly, said Canori. My ego got the better of me when I told people about having gold. Another lesson to be learned here, folks. Of course, it's a little ironic as you're listening to this on a precious metal channel where I've shown my gold and silver, but again, you have to have some contingencies. Of course, the way I've accumulated was totally legitimate. However, and notwithstanding, it's always good to think a step ahead of criminals or potential criminals, which is why security is so important for your precious metal stack. Nonetheless, voluntarily, and so this is about having telling people he had gold, and even with more stashes yet to be revealed, the barter became a bargaining chip. Voluntarily, self-surrendering his $10 million in gold scattered around the Lake George area, pleading guilty and confirming the bare minimum of Giove's statement, and a conspirator, Canori, spent only 2 days in jail. The article says co-conspirator, but that's redundant because a conspiracy by its very nature always involves more than one person. Upon release in 2014, following time in and out of incarceration after the arrest, he managed to retain legit assets that include a stock, banks, accounts, and real estate. He still can't get over the fragility of illicit enterprises. I did things right thousands of times, but fed up once, marveled Canori. In a legitimate business, you screw up, you have a corporate meeting, and get back on track. In a criminal business, you make a mistake, and you're in shackles, or maybe even worse. Then a DEA agent tells you to flip on everybody you know. It's either that or else go to your mother's backyard and out into the woods where you dig up $10 million in buried gold. Canori opted for the latter and kept his mouth shut. How did it feel to finally lead the feds to his fortune? After spending months in jail, and being able to walk on grass, get fresh air, and feel sunlight on my face was worth millions. But honestly, I overpaid. As for life these days, Canori has to admit that he's not doing too badly. He insists that all of the gold has been turned over to authorities. If he's smart, he probably still has some other stash somewhere else that he hasn't told anybody, including the New York Post. Nevertheless, he remains financially comfortable. I'm not rich as all get out. I can't afford $5,000 hookers. But with my book published, I'm trying to figure out my place in this legitimate world. Hopefully I'll get into legal cannabis. That's the next chapter. Indeed. So lessons to be learned here. And let's take a look really quickly here, because we have some other photos from this seizure when it was first done in 2009. And so we can see boxes of cash there, lots of it. Press release from the Department of Justice. Some of these images are not loading, but here you can see his picture. Here is some of the gold that was found. Kilo gold bars by the tens here. Pretty amazing. Wow. And there is some gold coins. It looks like gold eagles, stacks of gold eagles, and others as well. Tubes of other gold coins there. Fascinating. There's another satchel full of cash. There's the silver dug out. Here's the silver being dug out. Or no, that's gold being dug out. Pretty amazing. Wild. So there you have it. So lessons to be learned. An empire of marijuana, gold, and silver. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all for taking the time to watch, and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.